Legacy is the most important thing in the DC universe. It's what it's built on, and sometimes DC doesn't feel the same way. Cough, cough, heroes in crisis. Cough, cough. Oh, sorry about that. To get a little grip of why Legacy is so important, I have to take you to a trip through the history of the DC universe. How's it going, everybody? My name is Red Out Comics, and well, I talk all things comics, really. Today, as I mentioned in the title, I'm going to be covering Wally West and the meaning of legacy in the DC universe. So, yeah, let's begin. In 1956, comics weren't doing so. Superhero comics, at least. World War II ended over a decade ago, and people didn't have the interest in stories of good fighting evil. They were sick of it. At this time, horror comics were thriving. Books like Batman and Superman were considered to be canceled. So in October of that year, DC Comics created Barry Allen, The Flash. Later, DC also introduced Hal Jordan as the Green Lantern. Except there was already a Flash. Jay Garrick, he was the Flash for years. Also, what about the other new characters appearing? Like Alan Scott was the Green Lantern, and now Hal Jordan is. So, DC came with a story called A Flash of Two Worlds, explaining that Earth 1 is the Earth after the release of Barry Allen, and Earth 2 is everything before the beginning of the DC multiverse. A couple of years later, in 1959, Wally West was first appeared, who later became a founding member of the Teen Titans with characters like Robin, Dick Grayson at the time, and Donna Troy. Now, let's take a jump to the 80s. Marv Wolfman, a writer at DC Comics, thought that the multiverse introduced back in the late 50s was too confusing and unfriendly for new viewers. He wanted to abandon it. His idea was to create one singular, unified DC universe. The foundation of this event was built on the character of the Monitor, introduced in his new Teen Titans book at the time, full of legacy characters not known at the time, but is quite interesting. At the end of Crisis, Barry Allen sacrifices himself to save the multiverse, leaving Wally West to take over the mantle of Flash, and people loved it. Later, DC would release Death of Superman and then Reign of the Superman, with 4 new Superman going into action. Hal Jordan became Parallax, making Kyle Rayner the last Green Lantern. Shortly after the success of Death of Superman, DC introduced a story called Nightfall, and on part 11, Batman's back is broken, leaving Azrael to take over the mantle. After Final Crisis, Batman died, but not really, just sent back in time. Then, a story called Battle of the Cow was released, where the Batman family battled to see who would be the next Batman. Dick won, making him Batman until Bruce came back. Hell, the Robin mantle itself could be considered legacy and characters like Tim and Damian are legacy characters. Sure, some were good and some were bad, but am I proving a point here? DC is surrounded by legacy characters. It's what it's built on. Post-crisis DC universe is about legacy. You see recently, like in DC Rebirth, the surge of importance in legacy characters again. Stories like Death Metal being a love letter to DC, its characters, and legacy itself. The meaning of legacy really stems from the meaning of the DC universe. DC, to me, is about living up to the legacy or being the best person you can be and doing good no matter what. Think about it. Superman is doing good no matter what because he was taught that by Mom and Pop Kent. Batman is doing justice to criminals that prey on the weak, having vengeance on his parents' murder. Wonder Woman is always doing good and living up to the mantle of her sisters and the gods. Arthur is living up to the mantle of being king. Hal lives up to the mantle of his father, with him dying in a flight accident. And of course, then there's legacy. That goes all the way back to Wally. He is the most important character in DC. He represents legacy, and legacy is the meaning of the DC universe. I hinted at this in my last video about why I love Superman. Him and Wally West are probably the most important characters. That's one of many reasons why I love Wally. Now, I know what you're thinking. Not every video is going to be why I love blank, but that's not. I'm just telling you why legacy and Wally is so important. But through all of this, DC still doesn't believe it. I can't tell you how many times legacy characters have been screwed over, starting with Heroes in Crisis, the book that destroys the character of Wally West. I'll cover the train wreck that is Heroes in Crisis in another video, but if you want to know about the book, I recommend Infinity Comics' video. And if you want to know more about how DC loves to disrespect Wally, check out the Comic Lanterns video. Hey, it's Editor Me. At the time of this recording, Wally West was actually announced as the new Flash, so that's pretty cool. Hick isn't the only example, though. In issue 55 of Tom King's Batman, Dick Grayson, beloved character, is shot in the head, losing his memory, becoming Rick Grayson, an edgy punk with his head shaved. Please do not read that story, it is terrible. That is not the only time DC has screwed over Dick either. They are still disrespecting his character. Now, that's just 2 examples, and there are so many others. It's a shame to see that legacy characters are disrespected for shock value and all to just sell comics. And it's even more of a shame considering legacy is so important. Legacy is what the DC Universe stands for, and I wish DC felt the same way.